1985, the Jahan Sadat laws that were allowing women to initiate divorce were repealed. And they were replaced by certain provisions in the law of personal status, including provisions in the areas of ta'a, which is obedience. Now remember, this is a historic moment. This is also when the open door policy was crippling the economy in many ways. And so the state responds by curtailing women's rights. So what's happening is the public discourse is going back into the realm of personal status and away from what's happening in the rest of society. In 2000, and this is a really public moment when historic changes to the personal status code are redone again. Laws providing the possibility for khula or women to be able to initiate no-fault divorce for the first time without agreement of her husband if she gives up her financial rights. This historic change was challenged on the grounds that it would undermine society, it would change the nature of society, it would alter the family, and subsequently lead to societal discord. If you remember the media coverage, especially the newspaper coverage at the time, cartoons were depicting women fooling men with dog collars, with leashes. Men were pushing baby carriages. These cartoons were aiming at alerting society of the social upheaval that would occur if women would be granted more rights. Against women, again, here women are symbolizing change and subsequently instability, ultimately needing to be controlled once more. Why is all of this important for us to understand? I'm going to leave aside culture, heritage, and religion and focus on the law because I believe that these things that we're focusing on in terms of culture, religion, and heritage didn't exist in the past. But they are institutional today by design because of this pathology of authoritarianism. But I do think this fear of religious institutions and the reform of religious institutions in Egypt today needs to be taken very seriously very soon. So I'm going to leave that stuff aside, but really focus on the law. In terms of the law, the writing of the Constitution and the coming parliamentary elections, we need to look at important lessons learned from the experiences of Western law and where historically women's selfhood was systematically subordinated and diminished and belittled, and in many ways outright denied. Historically in the West, women have been cast as lesser forms of the masculine individual. The paradigm of the self in Western philosophy, as we all know, is primarily derived from the experience of wealthy male white men. And so here, who are in advantaged positions to be able to write the law. And so women in the West, especially here in the United States, have had this interesting relationship to power, where the more active women became in society, the more suspect they became, because they're challenging this male-dominant authority. Women activists over the years have become social agitators. We see this today with the allegations against things like Code Pink, right? Again, the anti-war movement being led by women, women are becoming social agitators again. And one of my colleagues, Jocelyn Boriska, refers to this category as suspect citizens, as women activists becoming suspect again, even though what they are doing is being active members of democracy, but are treated as if they are undermining democracy. So this is something we need to be very cognizant of when we talk about activists, especially in the modern context. In the case of Egypt, especially in the modern context, women historically moved through this with also the backdrop of authoritarian control, and laws being amended and implemented for the purpose of social control of society as that primary backdrop. So the plight of women today in the post-revolutionary moment in Egypt is actually more critical than I think people are making it out to be. It's critical because the injustices of the Egyptian authoritarian past need to be addressed. And they need to be addressed in the current constitution if substantive changes are going to be made in the coming parliamentary assembly. Remember Asma Mahfouz, right at the start of my talk, the girl who made the video? She was calling for the defense of her dignity to fight for rights. But in many ways, she was redefining dignity. What she was saying is that social upheaval would lead to the restoration of dignity, but it's the Egyptian dignity. not the constructed dignity that the authoritarian pathology had constructed for society. And I know I'm almost out of time, and hopefully in the Q&A we can possibly look at elements of the current Constitution and the debates around them and the implications of these debates for the future, not of Egyptian women, but of Egyptian society, as active participants in society, because the morality and family show up in the new Constitution again. And so we have to be aware of the implications of these categories. So in conclusion, women as both symbols of change and instability have a long legacy in Egypt's authoritarian past, and thus the control of society through women has become institutionalized, politically and in many ways socially through practice. And what we need to understand is in the coming phase, these things need to be addressed. Thank you so much.